for tapping in. Welcome to my safe space. My name is Jewel, aka The Healing Honey. Thank you to Detroit Slut Wall, specifically everybody involved, everybody that's wanted to come, everybody that retweeted. Just thank you to your whole organization for supporting me throughout this. So I appreciate you guys so much. This is just a safe space we wanted to come and bring to you guys to highlight mental health and specifically a form of trauma being sexual assault. So just to give you a little bit of background as to why this was important. Not only is sexual assault prevalent, because it is, but specifically within our community locally, recently a lot of stories of survivors have come out against specific people that might be more prominent in the community, people that have certain positions. So that definitely was a big catalyst for us to do this. So I just want to acknowledge everybody that, spoke up and all the survivors. Somebody said my AC is loud. I can turn my AC off, I guess. It's not super hot. Okay, 1 second. Alright, I turned the AC off, so that should kick off in a second. I hope that helps. Let me know. So just a quick introduction again, my name is Jewel. If you have any questions at any point, please add them in the comments so I can stop and kind of address them or, things like that. My name is Jewel. I'm a therapist, a licensed mental health therapist. Oh, my cat is coming in here, so be prepared if she makes a cameo. I'm a licensed mental health therapist. I have experience working with people with autism. I did that for about 3.5 years. Currently working with families, individuals that are high risk, high needs, high donor. Just a lot of variety, working the spectrum of mental health and providing services. That's just a little bit about my professional experience. And yeah, thanks. So let's get into a little bit about what trauma is, right? A lot of people speak about trauma and use PTSD kind of loosely in today's society. It is a really prevalent diagnosis, not to say that is not true. Just to say that sometimes PTSD gets thrown and used for things that maybe it's not, or sometimes it's not recognized for what it is. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about PTSD first. So a lot of people that experience trauma, and I would dare say everyone that experiences some form of trauma will also experience post-traumatic stress disorder, and that's the body and mind's response to the traumatic event, kind of like an automatic way of the body and mind coping, and that comes in various forms. So let's get into that a little bit, shall we? So post-traumatic stress disorder is technically diagnosed by a licensed therapist, so I'm not here to diagnose anyone. That's not my intention today. I really just want to bring attention to how that might manifest in people and how it manifests in different ways, and give you more day-to-day examples. So for example, some people that experience PTSD might outwardly present as sad. And that's a pretty common expression of PTSD, to be sad, to be withdrawn, to be kind of disconnected from things, right? So that could be not taking pleasure in things that you would normally like to do. So people that used to enjoy certain hobbies, maybe not engaging in those hobbies anymore. That's one way that it manifests. It also could manifest in ways that people take care of themselves. Dora, please get away from my phone. I hope she doesn't knock it over. How people take care of themselves as far as hygiene or personal care, if they're eating or not. So different things like that could also be, okay, no, you're gonna have to get out if this is what you're doing, Dora. I'm sorry. My cat is, okay, yeah, I'm gonna get her out of here. Okay, say goodbye to everyone, cause yeah, bye. Okay, sorry about that. I forgot that I need to close the door behind me. PTSD also can manifest in sleep disruptions. So that's another daily function that can be disrupted. So maybe you're not sleeping, or maybe you're oversleeping. So those are two sides of one coin to be mindful of as far as sleep disturbances, eating disturbances, like I said. So some people may not eat, or again, on the other side, they might binge eat. So that's two different ways that might manifest. So PTSD kind of came to be known after World War One, when people started coming back from the war and they're having these symptoms that were different. That's normally expected in our culture, but at the time it wasn't. There was not a lot of mental health services. The VA wasn't really a thing. It wasn't very popular. There weren't a lot of veteran services at the time. So that's how the term PTSD became, and that's normally why PTSD is often associated with our veteran community. Does anybody have any questions so far? I know I'm kind of talking a lot, and this is different to be like online, so I can't like see people's faces or like get reactions. I'll just pause for a second. So I also want to talk about like treatments for PTSD. So I will be sharing a resource guide that has tons of treatment options, but the biggest treatment that is normally most common referred treatment would normally be like talk therapy or CBT, specifically even sometimes trauma-focused CBT. So I will have a link to find a CBT therapist if that is something you're interested in. I know I practice CBT heavily at my job, and I plan, I think August is the next cohort, so trying to get in for that one so that I can be TFCBT certified. So send me good vibes for that, please, guys. But just know that is a very respected and evidence-based practice, and by evidence-based I mean that it's been well studied and that it's been found to be effective at treating PTSD. So not just like, you know, hearsay, it's research has proven this to be effective. There you go. I had a brain fart. Another way, some people may not be ready to start therapy, start you on the path of treatment and recovery and healing, would also be creating community. And that's like the next topic that I'm going to talk about. So community is really important, and that's like one of the first things that we as humans long for, is that attachment to another human being. As a baby, you know, you need your primary caregiver to be there when you cry, because, you know, you can't talk yet, you can't do for yourself, so all you can do is basically wait for them to tend on you and, you know, be attentive to your needs, and hopefully that they were, and that you developed a secure attachment, but that's not always the case. That's just a basic, like at a baby level, right? So as an adult, it's the same thing. Like, we need friends, we need family, and a lot of adults find that our chosen family is actually closer to us than our birth family. And by that, I mean the people that you choose to spend time with, the people that you choose to be close with, that you choose to be more intimate and more open with, as opposed to maybe the people that, you know, you share a last name or DNA. So those are the differences between chosen family and birth family. And community is really a similar thing, as far as like choosing your community and choosing your friends the same way you choose your chosen family. So that's important. And I want to be clear in saying this is not trauma bonding, right? So, for example, you wouldn't want to create community around something that is a traumatic event for you. Why? Because that then becomes a trauma bond, right? So some people might be like, oh, Jewel, what about, you know, certain groups that are like support groups and whatnot? And I'm mindful that those exist and that those are great, but that those are specifically to help people progress and to move forward, not to necessarily build interpersonal friendships and relationships. With that, I hope answers that question. So back to like finding support and community, like now that social media is a thing, and now that we know we're kind of still in this COVID world where we're not really able to have some of the social interactions that we're used to, I think it's very important that people are aware and open to other ways that we can create community, and using those to our advantage. So like, for example, the internet, right? We all are pretty active on social media, like we're on Instagram right now, right? That's a great way for you to find people that might be interested in similar things that you are. For example, maybe one of your coping skills you found is like art. That's pretty common. Like, you might like to paint, so maybe you go on Instagram or Facebook and you find a group of local painters, and maybe you guys, once a month have like a group FaceTime or like a group video chat where you guys all paint together and, talk about whatever. That can be a way that you find community, or if you haven't found it, you could start it and create community. So that's just like one example. Or maybe you're a single parent. There's so many support groups for single parents, and I know especially now that a lot of parents are home with their kids, a lot of parents need more help and more suggestions and more tips. So please look and please create that community. Find people that are near you, or if you can't find people near you, reach out on the internet for people that you can be like internet friends with and still have that sense of community and create that for yourself. So that's important as well. And I want to stop and see if anyone has any questions. Again, let me know. First and foremost, like the topic of consent. I think consent is something that we definitely have to at least mention in this conversation, right? Like, what is consent? How do you ask for consent? What type of conversations are we having about consent? Because it seems to not be enough at this point. So we're going to open that dialogue up with consent first. And I really want to know, like, how do you ask for consent? Like, what do you think is an appropriate way to ask for consent? Feel free to like type it in the comments. I'm just interested in knowing, how people ask for consent and what type of things do you think you need consent for. And this is often a conversation, especially I know in my job now, I have a lot of my teenagers that are like starting to be more sexually active, or just starting in general to be like sexually curious, having these conversations. And even for my older ones who might already have been sexually active before I met them, or at any point, these are conversations definitely to have. And I think it's important just to have it more often so that it is more casual, and also that people can realize that consent is a conversation to have more than once, and that it's not a conversation just to have the first time, for example. So want to know what you guys think about consent. Let's start with that. So yeah, definitely important to ask for consent throughout whatever relationship. Definitely important to ask for consent throughout maybe even the course of one event, and by that, or by one encounter. So maybe, things are progressing throughout the evening. It's important to make sure that you're checking in throughout that encounter so that things aren't going further than the person is comfortable with. That's important to bring up. Oftentimes after a traumatic event, feeling safe is hard. People's safety is threatened. At a very basic sense, they were violated in some way, so naturally they could feel, threatened or unsafe or, vulnerable in various ways, right? So I want to make sure that we talk about, how to feel safe again and what that means, right? So how do you ground yourself? How do you bring yourself back to feeling empowered to do certain things? Because oftentimes people that have experienced a traumatic event will avoid certain events or topics or things like that because it's uncomfortable or because it feels unsafe to them. So definitely want to bring up like how to return and feel like empowered to do those things again. So feeling safe, for example, like in grounding in your body, I think is important to make sure that you're aware of your breathing on a very basic level. I just want to preface that. Some definitely have lots of breathing techniques that you can do, and I'll share those in the link as far as like deep breathing, how to slow down your breath, because oftentimes when you're stressed, you're not properly oxygenating your body, and on a very basic body functioning level, that's going to cause you some distress, right? So I wanted to make sure that you're physically lessening those distress signals so that way you're not feeling so much of it. So that's one. I have a post about a lot of grounding techniques, 11 specifically, so that's also linked in here. I definitely think breathing is one. Another one could be like having something tactile to bring you back. Because oftentimes you might be triggered by things or just have random anxiety, right? But that's okay, that's natural, that's understandable. So having like a fidget, I know like I have stones, like magnetic stones. I have a fidget that's a spinner one. I have a cube one. Those are all just ones that I like, but try, different things. If maybe that's not what you're into, you could also try like having something more oral. So like some people like certain candies that might be like sour, or a candy that's like super hard because maybe you're really tense and you clench your jaw. So instead of doing that, you can take that, I guess, pressure out on like a candy or something. What's the best way to explain it? So that's another option for you to think about. So just to keep in mind that different practices can help you to regain your sense of security, and to try different things to see, because maybe one thing might feel good this week, but then next week you don't like it. So just, try things, be open, and just do what feels right? That's my best suggestion for that part. Anybody have any questions? Gonna take another pause real quick. Okay, so next I want to move into like moving forward in like steps of healing, for example. And first I want to talk about coping specifically. So coping is basically how you are able to deal with an event, whether it be traumatic or stressful, pleasant, unfortunate. You could cope with anything, right? It's just really how you deal with any type of event or trigger, etc. So I want to know, like, does anyone have any good coping skills they want to share? Drop those in the comments. I definitely want to start a conversation about coping skills, and definitely open your mind to maybe some different types of coping skills and what coping could look like outside of maybe what you've experienced. So coping is really important, not only as far as moving forward, but also in protecting the person that experienced whatever events, and specifically in this case, whatever traumatic event. And coping is also important because oftentimes when a traumatic event happens, the brain is kind of left in that state. So for example, say your life is threatened, right? You're super heightened awareness, you're probably sweating, your brain is really heightened at that triggered moment, right? That is to say, when you experience triggers, your body's primary response is going to be to repeat those physiological responses, right? So coping is important so that your body learns that when you're having triggers, you're not experiencing those same immediate danger. A symptom of PTSD is oftentimes re-experiencing those body sensations, for example. So when you're triggered, for example, like war veterans that hear fireworks and they drop to the floor, or hearing gunshots and they drop to the floor and it triggers them. That's an example of that. So coping helps to de-escalate those responses and to regulate your physiological responses to triggers. I hope I explained that well. That was a mouthful for myself. So I wanted to know, like, if you guys have coping skills that you wanted to share. I'm gonna start by sharing some of mine. I love to cook. I'm not really like artsy, for example. Like, I can't paint, I cannot draw. Some stick figures is the best that I can do, but I like to express through my hands, for example. I like to express using like cooking, because that to me is like a form of art. I think we all can agree that it is. So to me, cooking is a coping skill. I know that when I am, maybe not in the best place, I don't feel like cooking. So for me, it's nice because when I'm like super stressed, I can just kind of take out a couple hours of my day or my evening and just get away from it all, escape. And that for me is a coping skill. Also, and I should also say, like, a coping skill should be with the intention of coping, right? I don't want people to confuse a coping skill with like a distraction. Okay, so can your coping skill distract you from maybe your trigger? Yes. Should your coping skill be a distraction from reality? No. I hope that distinction is clear. So for example, a negative coping skill would be maybe using substances. That's coping, but is it a positive coping skill? Not so much. A positive coping skill, on the other hand, would be like working out. Does that make sense? That's the difference there. Definitely wanted to highlight like the difference between positive and negative coping skills. So I also want to talk about, as far as like moving forward, resilience and how to create resilience. So a lot of people maybe haven't even heard of what resilience is. So let me back up, right? Resilience is a trait, by definition. Yeah, that's the best way that I would explain it. And let me open something 1 second. I have a link. Here we go. Okay, so specifically when I say resilience, I'm referring to psychological resilience, and that was coined by Dr. Buckwalter. Yes. Keeping my names correctly there. And I want to kind of bring some of his research up because I think it's really important and a good perspective. So by definition, psychological resilience is someone's ability to cope with and return to their normal or pre-trauma state of functioning following a traumatic event. So basically, it's how well do you bounce back after a major stressful event or trigger or etc. Okay? Also wanted to talk about like supporters, right? So let's bring up like how supporters can support survivors of traumatic events. I think that's important to talk about. Oftentimes, it's difficult for supporters to hear about a traumatic event. Oh, and let me pause. Does anybody have any questions? I apologize. I'm moving fast. Take a break. Okay, so moving into supporters again. So, want to address how supporters can create space. So, for example, like, oftentimes it's difficult for supporters to hear that something traumatic or something negative or something bad has happened to someone that they care about or love, right? Understandable. Oftentimes supporters are not sure how to show proper emotions. Understandable. So let's talk about that. The biggest emotion that a survivor would want you to express would be empathy, right? On a very basic level, showing empathy. And by empathy, I also mean like care and concern, because maybe you're confused. Maybe you don't have all the details. Maybe, you know, you're still in a state of shock or panic because you're hearing these details, right? So at a very basic level, you can be caring, you can be concerned. Those are appropriate emotions, right? I would be cautious as to what questions you ask. I think that it's important to allow people to share when they're ready. But I also think that if someone is opening up to you, it's appropriate to ask light questions. And by light questions, I mean you don't want to just jump in the deep end first, right? Let's not do that when you're talking about any sensitive topic, right? I think anyone that's showing care, concern, and empathy would not do so. So you want to start with the light questions. And if they're open to those light questions, then ask, right? You don't just want to just dig in. Ask if they're open to explaining more, and then let them tell you what more is. So you want to be mindful, you know, for example, to use more open-ended questions and maybe not as many direct or specific questions, because you're not aware at this point maybe what the triggers might be for them or what might upset them. So open-ended questions and more like vague and light and like loosely worded questions so that the person can then fill in the specifics and fill in the blanks is more helpful than you necessarily just digging right in there. So that's another tip. And this is not for everyone. Let me preface that. The next thing that I was going to say is not for everyone. So another way that you can support someone through a traumatic event is through checking in, right? Everybody might not be open to a check-in. I'm just gonna say that. Some people don't want to be bothered. I think as a friend or a loved one, you have to discern and inquire about where their level of socialness is, for example. But I do think it is important to check in. Even if somebody says, no, I don't really want you to check in, okay. You could say, I appreciate you saying that, but for right now, would it be okay if I maybe just checked on you every week? And maybe they don't want you to call, but you could send a text, right? That's something light, but that can show that you care, that can show that they're still loved, because a lot of people feel like after a traumatic event that they did something bad to deserve it, or that they're somehow less than, or that they're the bad person, and that's not the case. So you really want to show that care again, that concern and that empathy if you are going to check in. You don't want to check in just to be nosy. That ain't helpful. Okay, so just be mindful of that if you are going to check in. And also understand that checking in can come in different ways. For example, like you could check in and maybe bring someone food. Maybe, your friend is not eating as much, or, they don't have the energy to cook. Maybe you bring them food. That's checking in, right? That's a show of care. That's a show of concern. Maybe somebody has children. Maybe you come pick up the kids. That's helpful. That's care. That's concern, right? That's checking in. So just think of ways that you can show up for that person. And if you're not sure, ask that person, how can I support you through this? What can I do, right? And be open and available to offer some things, because a lot of people struggle to ask for help. That is also something that a lot of survivors experience, and people in general, like, let's be honest, like, struggle to ask for help, right? So be open to offering and being open to initiating those things, because asking for help is difficult, and especially in like traumatic times. Does that all make sense? Anybody got any questions? I feel like I'm going through this so fast because like no one is here. I'm just like going through and talking to myself. Shout out to my mom. She's in the comments. That's crazy. According to his research, he answered the question of how you do so. So he says this is done through learned mental processes and behaviors that enhance one's personal strengths and minimize the effects of negative stressors and triggers. Okay? So I'm going to say that again because that's kind of a mouthful. This is done through learned mental processes and behaviors that enhance personal strengths and minimize the effects of negative stressors and triggers. So basically, what I interpret that as is it's through learning positive coping skills. Okay? So through his research, the name of the researcher, got you, Dr. Galen Buckwalter. Yeah. And I have a link on my website. If you type in resilience, I have a resiliency guide. It's like an article I wrote that kind of talks about how we respond to trauma. It links his article there and also gives you 10 ways to build resiliency, which I'm about to get to. So he identified like 3 characteristics, or what he calls the big 3 of resilience. And those are strength, purpose and meaning, and pleasure or happiness. Okay, so his big 3, again, are strength, purpose/meaning, and pleasure/happiness. Okay, and these are strengths that he says should be experienced cognitively as well as emotionally to build resilience. So, enough of like the research mumbo jumbo. That's just the therapist in me jumping out being a nerd. I've identified 10 ways to build resilience, so I'm just gonna like share those. And again, if you guys have any questions, please leave a comment and I will get to it. Okay. So the first one I have is finding your tribe. So I talked about that earlier, about creating community, and that's super important because, again, we're social beings, and especially when you're dealing with a traumatic event, a lot of people withdraw. So it's important to find people that you do connect with, so that you want to connect and that you are engaged socially, because again, we're social beings. We need that attachment, we need that closeness, whether we at the time desire it or not, because oftentimes you might not desire it really, but we do need it. So that's important. You don't want to isolate yourself, right? You don't want to withdraw to the point that you've isolated yourself and become like a one-man island. That's never a place you want to be. So I think it's important that if you are going through a traumatic event, that you, as much as possible, find support. I hope that you're in a relationship or have relationships in your life that people are supportive of you. But if that is not the case, please, 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 please do not hesitate to reach out and get those supports. Create those supports for yourself, whether it be finding a therapist, which of course I'm going to get to, or like creating community if you're not ready for that. Just making sure that you're not self-isolated and alone when you're experiencing traumatic events, because that's not good. Okay. It's also important, let's just throw this in there, if you're going to find your tribe, to surround yourself with people that have your best interest at heart. I think a lot of people maybe that are lonely might attach themselves to people that might not be the best for them, and just be mindful to not do so. Be mindful to still be protective of yourself and not to just take maybe whoever might be trying to comfort you, because that could be, maybe not the best. Just leave it at that. And then also making sure that you're open to accepting and learning to accept genuine help, right? So if people are there to genuinely help you, if you have close friends, close family, and they're there and they are trying to help you, accept it. And that might be difficult for people, you might not even want to ask for help, let alone accept it, but it's okay. We all need help sometimes, and that doesn't make you less than. That doesn't mean that you can't do for yourself or anything of that nature. Be open to that support and appreciate that you have it, to be honest. I think that's a better perspective to take, don't you? Number 2, moving on, brace yourself, right? Brace yourself. I never want people to have the misconception that because the traumatic event is past, that you're like all in the clear and that everything from this day forward is going to be sunshine and rainbows. That might not be the case, right? I'm very realistic with people that I see like as clients, and even just friends and family, and even myself. Like trauma is a continuing healing process, and to be mindful and aware of maybe the ebbs and flows, those ups and downs that are going to come emotionally, physically, socially, however that might manifest. So just be open and aware of that. So yeah, I just tell people always, like, just keep swimming. Like, that's the best way to explain it. Like, sometimes, maybe a fish isn't always like actively swimming, but they're still in the water. They're not about to just hop out of the ocean because, it's tough, or because the current is picking up or whatever. So just keep swimming. At some point, it does get better and it does stay better. And then a way to motivate yourself to continue swimming is to highlight your accomplishments and to like praise yourself and to be mindful of your milestones, and maybe to even like set milestones for yourself so that you can celebrate yourself. So maybe those down moments are gonna come, but maybe you have like a list of 2 or 3 things that just would mean a lot to you on your healing process, and as you accomplish those, celebrate yourself and acknowledge those wins, because that's important. Those up moments are more important than those down moments, even though we, for whatever reason, are more drawn to the down moments. Number 3, so accept versus change. So that's really your only 2 options, right? When you're given things in life, your 2 biggest options are to accept it as it is or change. 2 things you can do. And if you're gonna change it, be prepared for whatever that comes with, and if you're gonna accept it, being prepared for whatever that comes with. So I always tell people and advocate for, choice therapy, and that is to say that everything is a choice. And I also would like to advocate for maybe looking at things from a more positive perspective, because if everything is a choice, then that gives some type of accountability to you. That's not to say that blame is always associated with that, because I think some people hear accountability and think, oh no, that's a bad thing, and I don't believe that. I think accountability is a great tool for self-reflection, a great tool for self-growth, and it's important for any self-aware adult to have. So just being aware that those are really the two biggest options in like being prepared for whichever decision you make and following through with that. So it's important after a traumatic event to reassess your goals and priorities, right? This applies to like how you might view the event or how you view yourself or emotions that you might have like after the fact. So I think it's important, all the time to reevaluate your goals, but especially after a traumatic event, because maybe things that were important to you before are not important to you now, right? So say for example, you were part of a bank robbery and you're like one of the hostages, right? Maybe before, you were really focused on making a lot of money and, you didn't really spend a lot of time with your family. But after that event, maybe now family has become more important to you. So that's like an example of, how maybe your priorities or even your interests could change. So just be mindful of maybe how your priorities and your goals could change. Number 4 is progress, not perfection. And that's to say, to be mindful and aware and to accept that progress is the goal, not perfection, right? Perfection is never attainable. Perfection is always fleeting. It is always out of reach because it's perfection. No one's perfect, right? So don't even try to be perfect. But it is important to continue to make progress. As long as you're continually progressing, that's good, right? And maybe some days you don't feel as like you made as much progress as you would like. That's also okay. Be forgiving and be kind to yourself on this journey that maybe your ideals and your time limits might not be the reality, and that's okay. Be patient with yourself through that process. So I think it's important. Also, write your goals down, right? So like we just kind of talked about before in number 3, it's important to write your goals down because you want to know what progress you want to make. You need to plan what progress you want to make. So it's important to tangibly have that and to hold yourself accountable. I know a lot of people, when I ask them like, okay, what do you want to do? They have a plan like in their mind, but that's a plan, that's an idea. What you gonna do with an idea? You have to execute that idea. So write it down, make it tangible, really give yourself the accountability and follow through and make the progress, because that's really what you want to continue to do, is continue to progress. Number 5 is carry a big stick. So what is it? I think Teddy Roosevelt kind of had that war phrase, which I'm not about to quote him because boo him. But I think it's important that you're assertive for yourself. A lot of people following a traumatic event are, withdrawn and maybe a little bit more timid and not as assertive because they've been violated, for example. So that could be a difficult spot for them. Try as best as you can to be assertive. It's important, right? You don't want to feel like people are just going to run over you. That's not a good feeling, right? That could be a triggering feeling. So being assertive is important. Not to say like, be aggressive or be rude or be abrasive or anything like that. But it is important to speak up for yourself and to reclaim your voice and your independence and your dominance. Anybody have any questions? I'm about like halfway through this. Let me know. Okay, moving on. Number 6 is develop self. So that means really taking time to get in touch with yourself. Simply put, like you really want to, following specifically a traumatic event, right? When you're probably questioning who you are and questioning things around you, it's really important to take that moment and come back within yourself and to be introspective, right? That's beautiful. So developing self and to reflect and to reconstruct, that's the word I wanted to use, to reconstruct yourself, right? Because after any traumatic event, like for example, you break a leg, you gotta go to physical therapy to get that back together. Like after you've had surgery and all type of stuff, like you've had a brace put on, and there's a long process for that. So there's a development of the leg after you've broken it. So the same thing, after something happens to you, you want to reconstruct and redevelop yourself and do whatever you need on your healing journey to make you your best self. So that's important, okay? 7, self-affirm. So by that I mean keeping a positive image of yourself. So it's really often to get down on yourself or be self-critical, things like that, and you don't want to do that. Just as much as you can, stay positive, as much as you can, silence your inner saboteur. That's that's another blog post I have on my website about like silencing your inner critic and really staying positive for things and how to do that. So check that out on my site if you need. But self affirmations are also a great way. I have some affirmation posts on my site as well, like 50 affirmations for self-love. You can check that out if you need just some like examples for self affirmations, because that really does work as far as reclaiming your self-confidence, as far as like reconnecting to yourself and to your desires, to your emotions. That's really important. I really advocate for people to work at speaking out loud positive things. That is to say, thinking it is nice, right? Writing it is nice, but to hear it back to you is a lot more powerful. So I advocate saying them out loud. If you don't want to say it out loud, at the very least write it. I know personally I have them written down in my mirror in my bathroom, like 6 or 7 affirmations around my mirror that I like to say just to boost me up, because it's important, and put it somewhere that you can see and somewhere that it'll remind you, because oftentimes you just kind of don't be feeling it, or you just need a little boost, or whatever the case. I think it's really important that you're self-affirming. Moving on to number 8, stay balanced. So that is keeping things in perspective, as far as like not letting the negative thoughts take over, as far as not overloading yourself in your stress, as far as not overworking yourself in your responsibilities. In every aspect, it's important that you stay balanced, because a lot of times I've seen, or even I've done, after any type of traumatic events or just because I'm stressed, sometimes as a coping skill, I might overindulge in work, for example, doing way too much at one time just so that I'm distracted from something else, and that's not good. So really advocating staying balanced and having, for example, good work-life balance, also having like a good balance between social time and alone time, all those different areas, just to maintain balance. I think that's important, that you don't overindulge or withdraw. Those are common traits or common ways to cope and escape. So that's important. Moving on to number 9. Okay, number 9 is remain hopeful. So notice I said hopeful and not positive, because those are like 2 different words, right? Before we've already talked about like positive thinking and like affirming yourself, right? So that was one thing, but I really want to talk about being hopeful. And especially now, we in a whole pandemic, right? It's a pandemic. We got police brutality, basically a race war. Let's just call it what it is. Life is, American life is up in flames right now. So if you're having any type of trauma response or crisis moments, I can only imagine how difficult it might be to remain hopeful or to feel any type of optimism towards the future. But I really want to encourage people to try to hold on to whatever inkling, whatever little bits of hope that you might have, and keep hope alive. That's just basically what I need you to do. I need you to keep hope alive, because at the end of the day, if you're hopeful and you're optimistic that things are going to get better, then that is the vibration that you're sending out. That is the intention that you have, and that is what is going to come towards you. I think oftentimes the people that expect bad things to happen, bad things happen. I don't make the rules. I'm not God. I'm just saying what I have noticed. The people that expect good things to happen, a lot of the times I see good things happening to them. So, and notice I say good things, because sometimes the good thing might not be what you wanted. It might not be what you visualized was good for you, but it was still a good thing. So being mindful of that. But remaining hopeful, because that's so important. And having a hopeful outlook means there's always something to look forward to. So that ties back even to like the fact that we're looking for progress and not perfection, right? So if you always have some progress, some goal to look forward to, that gives you something to be hopeful for in yourself. So maybe you're like, I don't have no hope for this country. America done went to shit, right? Because a lot of people feel that way right now, and that's okay. So maybe you can be hopeful for yourself, right? Maybe you can be hopeful for your family, your children, right? So those are other things that you can be hopeful for. And then number 10 is practicing self-care. So I definitely have a self-care guide on my website. You can go check that out. 3 steps to self-care, where I break down like what self-care is and is not, and how you can practice it, of course. But self-care is really important, okay? You gotta take care of yourself, right? I talked about keeping a balance before, like work-life balance, social and independent balance. Those are all things that contribute to self-care, right? But self-care, let's specifically say, is an intentional activity or practice or time committed to you refilling and replenishing yourself. Anybody got any questions on self-care or anything so far, please let me know, because I have not stopped since. But that's what self-care is, and that's important because I like to tell people all the time, you cannot fill from an empty cup, right? So let's put a visual with it. If you're a cup, so that say that, that's just a visual representation of you. You go to work, a little bit of your water comes out. You have friends and family, some of your water comes out, all these other activities that you're doing, right? Your cup is gonna be empty at some point. What do you do? What can you do to refill your cup? That's important, right? It's important to make sure that you're giving yourself the care. And my bad, I didn't know that it was gonna cut off at 1 hour, so I was not being mindful of the time. Okay, I'm not really sure where exactly it cut me off from before, but again, the last tip for building resiliency was practicing self-care. That was number 10. So I'm gonna move on to the last topic. If you guys have any questions, comments, concerns, please let me know in the comments so I can address it, get you an answer. So the last thing that I'm going to be talking about is resources. I wanted to just go through kind of what the resource guide has. So if there's any questions, you can just ask me now, for example, and then just to kind of further explain kind of some of the things that I shared. Everything that's on here is links available, so you just click on it and it'll take you to the link for either the direct websites. If it's a YouTube video, take you to YouTube. And then I do also have a section of like worksheets, and the worksheets are all saved as PDFs that you can download and do what you will, fill them out, share them, whatever. So those will all be there. So on the resource guide, I have links to like different post or blog post that I have on my website that are related to mental health. So like the resiliency guide, self-care guide, affirmations, all that stuff is linked on there. I also have Michigan laws, so laws related to like consent, statutes of limitations, confidentiality laws, and also like legal definitions of things. That is linked there. I think that's important to know for people that are surviving, to know, what your options are legally, if that is an avenue you would like to pursue. I wanted to have that included. Also, of course, finding a therapist, right? I have plenty of links on here, different websites for finding different types of therapists. So for example, I referenced earlier CBT, and CBT being, the most commonly referred or prescribed treatment for PTSD. So I definitely have that on here. So there's a link to find a CBT therapist near you. I also have a link for domestic shelter databases, because some people might be in a situation where maybe their abuser is, the person that they're in a so-called relationship with. So that is also a very common experience that people have. And I know that in my line of work, I've definitely worked with women and men that have been on either side of that domestic violence situation, so that's something that is close to me, so I definitely had to add that. Psychology Today is a publication for like therapists and also just for like the everyday person that wants psychology resources. So I have a whole list of like direct links for their website, but of course there's more than just what I have linked. So for example, I have links for finding a local therapist, finding specifically a telehealth therapist, because I know we're still in a pandemic and maybe you don't want to go to an office, you want to just see somebody from your couch or from your living room or whatever. That's an option too, and that's like its own category. So that's on there. We also have searching for support groups, because maybe again you're looking to start building that community, or maybe you're looking to start finding some support, to start talking to someone. Maybe you're not specifically ready for a direct therapist yet, so that's another option, is a support group. Support groups are there. And then they also have a bunch of like overviews and guides for different things like PTSD, anxiety, trauma, depression, eating disorders, happiness, relationships, therapy itself. And they also have a lot of self-tests available to help you identify. So maybe you're like, do I need to go to therapy? They have a test about that, or they have like IQ test or depression scales, because maybe you're like, I'm feeling kind of low, but I don't know if this is quantified as depression. It's a very valid question. So there's a lot of online resources for you to help evaluate if you're at, a clinical, critical type phase. I also have the Breathe Network. So that is a network of holistic practitioners, and by holistic, I mean, in this case, non-traditional medicine. And specifically they offer sliding scales, because a lot of these non-traditional holistic practitioners are not able to get paneled for insurances. So that means that a lot of them have difficulty taking insurance as a form of payment. So instead they offer a sliding scale. So that means maybe the more you come, the less you pay, for example, or maybe they might, I don't know, I'm just gonna leave it at that. That's what a sliding scale is. So the Breathe Network is there. They encourage practices like acupuncture, massage, craniosacral therapy, somatic therapy, sound healing, yoga, hypnotherapy, feng shui, dance, like so much. So I have that on there. They also have a specific list of healing modalities for sexual trauma and providers that, would provide such. So I linked that on there. Next, I have the Somatic Experience Institute, and that's on there because trauma affects our body. They're on a very basic level, right? We're all, I would say, could agree that's a well-studied, a well-proven fact. So maybe you want to address, for example, a lot of people that get anxiety might experience butterflies in their stomach on a very mild level, right? But maybe on a more severe level, maybe you have very severe stomach issues because your anxiety is that bad. Or maybe, you have flashbacks that cause you, chronic pain or sleep paralysis, or however that might manifest in your body. The Somatic Experiencing Institute specifically addresses those type of concerns and how you can cope. So I have some links for there, like finding a practitioner, and then also they have a really good website feature. It's called Scope, and let me click on this because I kind of want to talk about it real quick. Stabilization technique is the best way, I would say, or what do they call it? A crisis stabilization and safety technique. Okay, so they have this cool graphic, and that is linked on the resource guide. It's there, but click on it and I would say save it on your phone, screenshot it, whatever. So just if you're having maybe a moment where you're triggered, where you're having a moment of crisis, where you're worked up, you're anxious, whatever, this can help you de-escalate and regulate your body. So SCOPE is an acronym, so SCOPE. S is slow down. So it says take 10 steps very slowly, noticing any sensations on the bottom of your feet. Okay, so that is literally, rolling from the heel to the ball of your foot for 10 steps to be very mindful. So that's like mindful walking, right? So that's the S. C is connect to the body. So that says cross your arms and ankles, tuck hands under armpits, lower head, and breathe. So crossing your arms, your ankles. Gotta tuck your, there we go, your armpits, lowering your head, and breathing. So like you're really connecting to your body. And when you do it, like I really can't do it and talk, but when you do it, you should be able to feel your body start to kind of come within itself. It's almost the same sensation of like when you hug yourself, how you get like a hug feeling, like, oh. It's a very similar like stabilizing feeling. The O is for orient. So that is slowly look around, noticing colors and shapes, let your gaze rest on something pleasant or comforting, like a brief visual vacation. Okay, so like look around the room. So like I would look around right now, like in my office, right? And I would be like, okay, I notice my picture frame there is black. And I give myself 5 things when I do this to notice, so that I'm like not just like rushing through it, like no, notice 5 things. There's a black picture frame, a white trash can, there is a blue cup, and I'm being mindful because some things as you look around the room are not going to catch your attention, right? So I see plenty of things that I can name, but I'm focusing on the things that catch my eye, and catch my eye for positive reasons, right? So 4 could be like my trouble game. I love trouble, so nostalgic. And 5 could be a flower, another flower over there. So that's orienting yourself and like briefly visualizing and focusing visually on like aesthetically pleasing or things that just make you happy. So that's the O in scope. And then P is pendulate. So that says notice a place of ease in the body and a place of tension. Slowly shift attention between ease, tension, ease. So normally, I can't say normally, that's not a good way to put it. Sometimes when you're experiencing like a moment of crisis or you're more heightened, you might have a spot in your body where you're physically tensed up, right? I know for me it's my jaw. When I am stressed, annoyed, triggered, anything, I'm clenching my jaw and probably grinding my teeth. Just something I do. If I'm not doing that, my foot is tapping or my fingers are like rubbing or tapping. That's just how my body will kind of express that tension. So for me, I would notice, okay, I sense the tension in my jaw. And then I would shift from clenching it to easing it, tension to easing it, tension to easing it, right? So being mindful of the tension that is there, and then hopefully by the time, between 3 to 5 times I do it, by the time you've done it, it should be relaxed, okay? And then the E in scope is engage, and that says engage socially. Connect with someone who can support you. So if you're in a moment of crisis, call someone. Very simply, right? So I work with adolescents, and in their crisis plan, it clearly states if they're having a crisis, who are they gonna call? Is it me? Are they calling me? Right? If that's the case, we're putting that in there. If I'm not available, they're gonna call the emergency on-call phone for work or a family member, but there needs to be someone that can socially connect with them and support them. Because sometimes, maybe the person you live with is not an option. So like in this case, like at work, for example, maybe the parents is not the most calming person when the kiddo is worked up. Because that happens, right? Maybe your parents just make you more escalated, so we're not gonna put them down. You're not gonna call them. Right? So maybe for you have one friend who likes to gossip, and if you call them, they're gonna talk about themselves or not, support you. So they're not the person to call. We're not calling them. You want to call and connect with someone socially that's gonna support you. Someone that's gonna listen to you, be empathetic, that's gonna show you that care and concern, right? So that's an important distinction to make. So that is scope, the SCOPE. So again, S is slow down, C is connect to body, O is orient, P is pendulate, and E is engage. So that was like a brief overview of their scope. And again, it'll be linked, so don't worry about that. So I also have the Calm app. So with everything going on like COVID, Calm really opened their app up and added a lot more free resources. So now I actually support their app a little bit more because before a lot of things were like paid features and it's like that's not helpful really. So now there's more free options. The Calm app, I have a post that they have that really highlights a lot of their mental health resources as far as like breathing techniques and things like that and how you can utilize their app to help, because sometimes maybe you need something, you might be on the go, or you're just looking to incorporate more like meditation practice or just in general deep breathing practices. So that's another way you can do that. I also have a whole little list of YouTube videos. So earlier I mentioned like deep belly breathing, so that's on here. Different breathing techniques. So I have like the 2-1 technique, 4-8-7, and I also have like 10 and 15-minute breathing like exercises if you're into that. Also have progressive muscle relaxation, and that is similar to like the idea behind the pendulum, the P for the scope, right? When you tense, ease, tense, and ease. The idea that when you're stressed and your body has these areas of tension, to go through and to mindfully relax your body and relax your muscles. So that's really something that I like to use a lot. So I have that on there. And again, that's called progressive muscle relaxation. That's on there. And then I also have the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. They have a really large online database for like data, finding resources, and just support in general, and for mental health as well as substance abuse. And I bring that up because I think it's important to mention, especially in today's society when drug usage is at a very high rates. I want to also include resources that speak to that. A lot of people, studies have shown a lot of people that use strong drugs at a high rates, and I do not like the word abuse, so that is why I'm intentionally straying away from that. But people that use drugs at a high rates are often survivors of extreme trauma, and often are survivors of compounded trauma, which means more than one traumatic experience. So with that being said and known and understood, I definitely had to include resources for that. So I have like on their website, they have a behavioral health locator. So like if you're looking to find someone for like behavioral health, so that's more like the mental health aspects. They also have an opioid treatment directory. That's super important when we're still not only in a COVID pandemic, but an opioid pandemic as well. So America's burning, but that's on there. They also have an early serious mental illness treatment locator. I did not name that. That's what they call it, but that references people that might have more serious mental illness. So like, for example, schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, those are more serious than, you know, someone with other diagnoses. So that's on there. And they also have like implementing a crisis plan. So if you're looking for a resource on that, that's there. Also included some hotlines. So the National Sexual Assaults, the RAIN network, I have their hotline on there. They also have a live chat. National Suicide Hotline have their phone and chat. I know currently the text number is not available, but once I find out that that has been made available, I will start sharing that information. So just know that a text option is soon coming, because the hotline number is difficult to memorize and really inaccessible to some people at times. So that concern has been heard and addressed. And then also have SAMHSA, so that's Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. There we go. So they have, again, a hotline in English and Spanish, so that is available for mental health and substance abuse. And just so people know, I really want to stress, hotlines are not therapy sessions, okay? Hotlines are not therapy sessions. So please do not have the expectation of such if you are to call a hotline, okay? That's not what's gonna happen. Hotlines are more so there for acute crisis care, so yes, that's the best way that I can say that. And then, like I mentioned before, I have some therapy worksheets, so I have like, I'd say 10 or so different therapy worksheets that I've just come across just working in the field. So they're related to things like stress reduction, breathing, coping skills, safety planning, changing the way you think, stress relievers, just various topics. So those are all there and available for you to download. And then I also have a few local therapists that I know and would recommend. So I do have a Reiki practitioner who is also a licensed therapist. Her information is on there, Lakima. I also have Chris, who is actually my mentor in the counseling game. Thank you for joining the live, Chris. Shout out to you. He is not currently accepting clients. I hate to say that because he is like a really great therapist, but his information is on there. Also have Raynard, who is another mentor for me in the game. Appreciate Ray. He has private practice and also accepts insurances, so I think that's important because some people, need people that accept insurance. So he's currently accepting Blue Care Network and Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan, and he's working on a couple more, so he'll be soon expanding that, but that is his current insurance paneling options. And then I also have Tiara, who is the founder and CEO of the Mind Management Institute, and I collab with them every year. They have a mental health fair every year. This year will be the 3rd year, but she also works in private practice, so that information is there, and I linked her bio if you want to know a little bit more about her. So that's all there. So please, any questions, let me know. If there's anything I can talk about further, if there's anything you need me to elaborate on or go back and talk about, please let me know. That's all that I have planned out for this evening. Thank you all for tapping in. I'm just gonna open it up for any questions, comments, concerns. Yeah, let me know. My website is TheHealingHoney.com. Shameless plug. That's also my Instagram, The Healing Honey. So feel free to follow me, connect with me, subscribe to my blog. I post on there. I have a YouTube channel now, so I'm starting to get in that a little dibble and dabble. You can add me on YouTube. So yeah, connect with me. I like to, give as much info as I can. So everything in my blog is normally like research based or like my personal experience. So always gonna have like references and things like that in ways it can be applied to you. So that's always kind of what my goal is. My blog focuses on mental health and healthy eating. So you'll see a lot of my plant-based and vegan cooking on there. I like to talk about that because I recognize the link between what we're putting in our body and what we're getting out. That's important, but that's a conversation for another day. So that'll be there. But again, I'm gonna add the resource guide. Just give me a few minutes. It's like 6 pages. I really put a lot of work into this. I just wanna make sure all the links and everything work before I share it with you guys. And then if there's any questions that maybe you guys don't wanna share, my DMs and my email are always open. You can always schedule a session with me. That's available as well. You can contact me for that or go on my website for that. Always available for that, or also providing referrals. If you need any referrals further than what I have listed here, I can link you to that or show you how to look up, finding someone within your insurance carrier or locally for you to receive services with. That's something that I'm totally comfortable with. Thank you all for joining. I'll upload the resource guide. Again, many, many thanks. So much gratitude to the Detroit Slut Walk. Please go make sure you guys are supporting them, tap in with their events. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Chantel. Really appreciate everything. Thank you to everybody that tapped in again. I appreciate you guys prioritizing your mental health and for joining me on Self-Care Sunday to, take some time for ourselves. And yeah, if you guys need anything, you should know at this point how to reach me. So, Ashe, and good night.